In Unit 5, we're going to look a little bit more closely at logical consequences versus punishment. Now we're going to begin this module or this unit looking at an example we used in the previous unit. Jake is running around the class when he bumps into Carla, who is packing away the class stationery. Carla falls over and all the stationery she is gathering falls out and onto the floor. Now, a punishment approach to this behavior would be to say, Jake, you never listen. You know the class rules. Now look what has happened. Go and sit in the corner and wait for the bell to ring. A punitive approach would involve scolding the learner in front of the class and in a harsh tone and voice with disapproving looks. An alternative approach would look something like this. Jake, can you tell me what happened? Well, Nathan was chasing me, so I was trying to get away from him and I accidentally bumped into Carla. Okay, so it was an accident. I did notice you did take Nathan's shoes from him. Could that be why he was chasing you? Yes, maybe. Often when we're running in class, we're not concentrating, and then accidents happen. That's why one of our classroom rules is safety first. How do you think you could help Carla now? I don't know. I could maybe help her pick up and pack the stationery away. Great idea, Jake. Now, the two different approaches have completely two different effects on the learners. A learner subjected to punishment could respond with, the teacher didn't even see what happened. I tried to tell her that Nathan was chasing me, but she wouldn't even listen. She never listens. She always picks on me. And Carla cries for everything. I hate this school. A very negative emotional result. While a learner subjected to a logical consequence in this situation might have responded with, when I knock things over, I need to help and pick them up. It was just an accident and I know how to fix it. My teacher helped me to solve the problem. I must remember to tell the teacher if Nathan is chasing me, and I must remember to walk in class. A more positive and more accountable outcome. Now, the underlying principles of logical consequences is that the teacher responds to the behavior and not the learner. This sends a very important message to the learner that their behavior is the problem, not that they are the problem. So one of the key principles is tone. It is very important when delivering logical consequences. If a child has forgotten their stationery at home, there are different ways that you can tell the child to borrow a few things from their friends for the day. As soon as the tone becomes harsh and punitive, it is no longer a logical consequence. A teacher's tone is critical when distinguishing a logical consequence from punishment. Logical consequences are, as it says, logical and relevant to the situation at hand. Logical consequences are always respectful and they always aim to preserve the learner's dignity. There is no scolding or humiliating of the learner. It is very important. So let's take a look at a few scenarios using punishment or logical consequences as a way of dealing with this situation. So the first one is, Grant and Isaac have a water fight at the basin in the classroom. Punishment for this behavior could be to sit inside during break, which could generate some negative feelings. A logical consequence could be that Grant and Isaac will now have to mop up the mess and clean the mess that they've made. Although they don't want to mop up and clean, they will understand that they caused the mess, so they need to clean it up. Now we remember that the same consequence for one situation can be demeaning in another situation. If Grant and Isaac, for instance, were talking and disrupting the class, and you made them mop the floors, that would be seen as a punishment. It would be humiliating for the learners. Let's look at another situation. Harisha is being disruptive during group work time. A punishment for this would be to make her write out the classroom rule several times, while a logical consequence would be to move Harisha on her own as she has to complete the work by herself now. She understands that it was her disruptive behavior that has caused her to be moved away from the group. If done in the correct tone and manner, it shouldn't be humiliating for the learner. And the last scenario is that Tony is being disruptive in class, and the teacher cannot complete their lesson in time. A common punishment for this behavior would be to send Tony out the class and to sit in the hallway, or go to the office. It is a quick solution to getting the class focused again. However, the learner is going to become more resentful. A logical consequence would be to keep Tony in during break and ask him to help you plan a lesson for the work that you didn't teach. He can get all the books and the resources ready. The point is that he sees how much work goes into the lesson, and he might be a little bit more interested and invested in the lesson if he helped prepare it, and should be less likely to disrupt it. But it is definitely a more time-consuming alternative, but it has positive results. So when a learner breaks a rule, you need to remember that it is the learner acting out for help. Although the disruption is exhausting and annoying, it is at this point that you need to remember to separate the learner from the behavior. There are no bad children, just bad behavior. And this behavior is a sign of distress and a signal for help. So before deciding on your consequence, you should always try to find out more information. And remember to never make the learner feel bad. Believe me, they already know that their behavior is wrong. Always keep the learner's dignity in mind, and that is the goal. At the very end is to help learners to recover their self-control and respect. Right, so let's go back to you need to find out more information. You first need to look at what rule is being broken. And did the learner know what is expected of them and what the appropriate behavior should have been? Next, look and see if there is perhaps a developmental issue at play. Often learners who are struggling with their work will act out in a defined manner to distract from their incompetence. Next, you need to reflect on yourself, you as the teacher, and look at what part you played. Perhaps the lesson was pitched too low, and the learners finished their work early and became bored and restless. Perhaps the lesson was boring. Most teachers don't like to acknowledge that their lessons weren't interesting and weren't relevant to the learners, because if they were, they would have very few behavioral issues. Next, you need to determine how this behavior is affecting the rest of the class. And lastly, and this should be done with the learner, you need to decide what logical consequence will assist the learner to learn from their mistake and help them to make better choices in the future. But ultimately, the process that you're going through now, the end goal is to help the learner to recover their self-control and respect. I'm going to end with an extract from a quote from Hume Ginott. As a teacher, you possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. You can either be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. You can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is your response that decides whether a child will be humanized or dehumanized. So next time you're about to dish out discipline, really think about if you are going to choose the route of punishment or a logical consequence.